If you like to talk about combat sports and you want to join the discussion, click the subscribe button below and the bell notification icon next to it and join Knucklehead Nation. What's going on, Knuckleheads? It is the Fighters Rep. Thank you for joining us on Keep It Clean with the Fighters Rep. And this is our Terrence Crawford versus Kavaliauskas, I hope I'm saying that right, and Covington versus Kamaru Usman Preview Prediction show. Really excited about this weekend of fights. It is absolutely popping. We got some big time fights going on this weekend and a lot on the line between the UFC and between boxing. There is going to be a lot on the line, so I think the best sort of standard operating procedure for us to proceed with here is to talk about that Terrence Crawford versus the Edgidigious Kavaliauskas fight. I think that's how you say it, Edgidigious, although I could be completely wrong. And then we'll transition into MMA afterwards. But man, I want to tackle this boxing stuff first because Top Rank is putting quite a card together for our viewing entertainment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're going to find out right now. We've got Terrence Crawford versus Kavaliauskas, also known as the Mean Machine. He's definitely mean. He's definitely a tough guy, and that is for the WBO welterweight title. We've also got on the undercard and in the co-main event, Teofimo Lopez Jr., one of the most explosive young prospects in the fight game, going up against Richard Comey for Richard Comey's IBF lightweight title. This is Teofimo Lopez's big chance to win a title. And we've also got the Irish Olympian. He's becoming a superstar in his own right, Michael Conlan. He's going to be going up against a guy named Vladimir Nikitin, and that's going to be in the featherweight division. And obviously, as all of you know, we've got UFC 245 and the main event, Kamaru Usman, where he goes against the highly controversial Colby Chaos Covington, one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters and favorite fighters. Definitely very interesting bunch of fights for us. So let's do what we typically do, and let's head right to the main event on that Top Rank card. Let's take a look at the tail of the tape. Once we're done with that, we'll tell you what we think each guy has to do to win, and then we'll give you our prediction. Subsequent to that, we'll do the same thing with Crawford, or rather with Covington versus Usman. So let's take a look at Crawford versus Kavaliauskas right quick here. We've got Terrence Crawford with 35 fights and 35 wins. He is a consensus top 3 pound-for-pound pick for anybody who knows anything about combat sports. The guy's just an absolute stud, fundamentally sound, strong. He's got killer instinct. He's got the finishing instinct. He's got everything you want out of a fighter. He can fight orthodox. He can fight southpaw. You know, he's got a mean streak in him. Everything you want out of a fighter, probably with the exception of a big mouth. And he really doesn't need it because his fists do the talking for him. And then you've got Edgidigious Kavaliauskas. We'll just call him the Mean Machine because that's his nickname. 21 wins and 22 bouts. He is coming off of a draw against a slightly above average, I would say, Ray Robinson, but not a world beater by any means. And, you know, that is the only draw, or the only blemish, I guess semi-blemish, on Mean Machine's record. As far as the KOs, we've got Terrence Crawford with 26 KOs in 35 fights, a pretty good percentage. And Mean Machine the same, 17 KOs in 21 fights. So there's a huge chance that this bout could end in a knockout, considering Terrence Crawford's knockout percentage, almost 75%. And your boy Mean Machine with 77%. Another interesting fact is they've got them listed as 5'8" for Terence Crawford versus 5'9" for Mean Machine. Now, if you ask me, when they're standing in front of each other, it really doesn't seem that way. I feel like Terence Crawford might actually be taller than this guy, unless I'm seeing things. But, you know, I guess it's extremely difficult for the boxing community, for whatever reason, to get some rulers and to get some measuring tape and to really put these guys together. Because if you're looking at the face-offs, you know, Terence Crawford is visibly taller. And, I mean, not by like 1 inch. I mean, it might be more like almost 2 inches. So I don't know where the hell they're getting these heights from, unless Terence Crawford is wearing some sort of Michael Jackson shoes or something. But, yeah, Terence Crawford, definitely taller. And for whatever reason, they've got Mean Machine as being taller. Go figure. And then the same thing goes with the reach. When I'm looking and researching, I'm seeing Mean Machine having a 71-inch reach versus Terence Crawford having a 70-inch reach. You know, something tells me that that might also be a statistic that's incorrect. I've also seen Terence Crawford having a 74-inch reach, so I think that's more accurate. But I know it kind of depends on where you look. I would imagine that Terence Crawford is a little bit taller and has a slight reach advantage at the very least over Mean Machine. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's going to mean a lot in this fight, and I believe it's going to mean a lot against Kavaliauskas, right? Because even though, and they're about the same age, so age is not a huge deal in this fight. You know, Mean Machine, 31 years of age, Terence Crawford, 32. Both guys basically priming or headed there. But the reach advantage for Crawford is really just another nail in the coffin. And I'm not going to say a nail in the coffin for Mean Machine. I'm going to say another nail in the coffin, because Terence Crawford has a reach advantage, has the height advantage. If you think that's an advantage, that's always kind of a toss-up for me, the height thing. But definitely the reach, I think, is an advantage. Terence Crawford's got the height advantage. Terence Crawford's got the experience advantage. Mean Machine has a slightly, ever so slightly, little baby 3% advantage in knockout percentage. But again, he's also got less fights and hasn't faced nearly the competition that Terence Crawford has faced. So, you know, again, Crawford reach advantage, height advantage, experience advantage, competition advantage. And by experience, I mean number of fights, but also not just quantity, quality for Terence Crawford. Just, you know, all around, all these advantages physically. I think he's got a, you know, athleticism advantage as well. And one of the most telling things for me is, and, you know, before I get into this, I don't want to write Mean Machine off completely, right? He's a tough guy, and he's earned his way to this fight. He really has, you know. Anyone that's basically not a PBC welterweight is, you know, not really that competitive. And so considering that, you know, Terence Crawford has to deal with sort of the rest of the welterweights that are not PBC welterweights, I mean, this is sort of, this may be the best guy that they can get their hands on, maybe other than a Pacquiao. Or, I mean, really, it's just slim pickings at this point for Terence Crawford. And, you know, again, I don't want to write Mean Machine off, but one thing that's really, really standing out for me here, Knuckleheads, is the fact, and I don't think anybody's pointed this out, so you heard it here first from the researcher dork you got here, is the fact that Mean Machine has never had a 12-round fight. And for you to go into your first 12-round bout against the consensus #1 or #2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and Terence Crawford, who's been fighting for 12 rounds himself since 2014. That's, you know, over 6 years, almost 7 years it's been since Terence Bud Crawford has been fighting 12-round fights. So, I mean, for Mean Machine to be going in there against a guy like Crawford who's been fighting for that long, 12-round bouts, it's not looking good for Mean Machine, you know. And I know he's got a very tough style. He hits very hard. You know, he's seemingly really aggressive. But I feel like guys like that really play into the hands of a Terence Crawford. I think if he sees any success at all, it'll be in the first half of the fight, maybe for the first 2 or 3 rounds, maybe as far as into the 6th round. But I really think that unless this guy is super tough and super durable, that Terence Crawford is just absolutely going to light him up tomorrow night. So my prediction for this fight is obviously Terence Crawford, and I would say that Terence Crawford probably gets the stoppage tomorrow night unless this guy is extremely tough. And I would say he gets the stoppage in the early second half of the fight, maybe between rounds, I don't know, 7 and 12, he'll get the stoppage. I just don't see this guy being able to deal with Terence Crawford's speed and tenacity and killer instinct and reach and IQ and all the rest of it. It's just going to be too much for him. Again, is there a chance that he wins? Yes, this is boxing. There's always the chance, but I feel like the chances are extremely slim to none, and I believe they have Terence Crawford as a minus 2,000 favorite, the odds makers do, and I think that's for very good reason, knuckleheads. Also, I'm just going to real quick give my predictions, on the other fights on the card, the main ones at least. We've got Teofimo Lopez Jr., the Honduran-American sensation, going up against a really tough Ghanaian and Richard Comey. I think that's an actual competitive fight. That's going to be, I think, a gem of a fight that we're going to get in boxing, where, as you guys know, and as we're always ranting about on this channel, is something we don't get a lot in boxing, these competitive non-A-side versus B-side fights. I mean, these are two guys that can really beat each other, especially Teofimo Lopez coming off of that rather unimpressive performance in his last fight. People are probably saying to themselves, this guy can probably get beat. And when you're talking about a tough, durable veteran champion like Richard Comey, it could happen. And Comey does have a lot of physical advantages as far as reach and height go, but I do think the explosiveness is in Teofimo Lopez's corner. I do think that Teofimo Lopez might be able to get Comey out of there, even though Comey is extremely tough. I think both guys are tough, but I do think that Teofimo Lopez's explosiveness is going to be the difference in this fight. And I do think that Teofimo Lopez gets the job done in this fight. I've seen Richard Comey get hurt, and I do think that Teofimo Lopez is explosive enough to get him out of there. So I'm expecting Teofimo also to perhaps get a middle to late fight stoppage in this fight, believe it or not, knuckleheads. And the odds only have Lopez up as a minus 270 favorite. And I actually had to think about this fight for a while, right? Because I wasn't sure who I was leaning towards. But man, I'm the kind of guy that I always go for, technique. And if the techniques are about the same, I go for the guy that I feel like is the most explosive, as long as he doesn't have any other crazy setbacks like a poor gas tank or anything like that. And I don't think Teofimo Lopez has any real drawbacks or cons as a fighter. I do think that Comey will give him a hard time with his length. I think he did show in his last fight he has a little bit of trouble with that. Comey's also very busy. But I think Teofimo Lopez is going to rise to the occasion at Madison Square Garden in front of his fans in New York City. And I do think he's going to come away from this fight a champion. And I do think he could be a star in boxing. Now, they're saying that Vasily Lomachenko, who's got the other 3 major alphabet titles in that division, is going to be present at Madison Square Garden watching this with a close eye. Do I think either of these guys is ready to fight Vasyl Lomachenko? Absolutely not. But I think if any of them eventually will get to the point where they could potentially give Lomachenko any sort of problems, it's probably Teofimo Lopez. So I'm going to go with him for a late stoppage. But this is a close fight, and Comey can win this. And I do think if Comey does win this, it'll probably be in the later rounds. But again, Teofimo Lopez, knockout, just too explosive. And then, of course, Michael Conlan is fighting Vladimir Nikitin. I don't think Nikitin has a real shot against Michael Conlan. This is a fighter, an Olympian that they're trying to build up, that they're probably going to want to protect a little bit. And I don't think he's going to see any real stiff competition until, a few more fights down the line. So I think he's going to get it done. And it's going to be a huge crowd out there in New York, especially with all the Irish people they got out there. It's going to be a fun one, Knuckleheads. So definitely tune in, man. This event's going down 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So 6 p.m. if you're on my side of the country. It's going to be on ESPN. You could stream it on Watch ESPN as well. So definitely, something that you guys want to look into. And, I'm looking forward to it. And just so I don't completely skip over it, I mean, the only drama between Nikitin and Michael Conlan in this fight is the fact that Nikitin got that controversial decision over Conlan in the Olympic Games, and that's kind of where Conlan got a lot of fame because he raised his middle fingers at the judges and rightfully so, cussed them out for their ridiculousness. We've seen these Olympic judges, corruption, time after time, rob some of the greatest fighters in the world, like they did against Floyd Mayweather and like they did against Conlan. So, he's famous for that, and there is that little bit of controversy involved in this fight. And might be another reason for people to tune in if they're interested, in order basically for Michael Conlan to get his revenge. So before I move on to UFC 245 and Usman versus Covington, I wanted to, say what's up to you guys in the chat. Thank you guys for joining. Be sure, if you haven't already, get your Fighters Rep gear below. Get your Fighters Rep t-shirt. Donate to the channel. It'll be extremely helpful in helping me not only build the channel, but also the only kickboxing promotion in the whole state of California, Fighters Rep 9. We got a fantastic card coming on the 28th of February. That's going to be our first Pro-Am card, and I'm extremely excited about it, so you guys are definitely going to want to check that out. So Pound for Pound Boxing 510 in the chat, along with Saul West. Thank you so much for joining, you guys. Pound for Pound says, what's up, bro? There's some good fights on the zone right now. Everybody who's waiting for Comey and Lopez might be fight of the night. I agree. I think Comey and Lopez is probably going to be the most competitive fight of the night, although you never know. But I do think it's going to be really competitive. I think Crawford is going to be an entertaining fight, although I do think he's going to get Mean Machine out of there. But yeah, Comey and Lopez is a fight that could kind of go either way. And that's something I'm excited about watching. It should be a good one. Saul West says, considering all the PBC welterweights are out of reach, Kell Brook and Josh Taylor are the most challenging fighters available next year for Crawford. That's assuming Josh Taylor goes up to welterweight. I mean, it looks like Josh Taylor is pretty comfortable making the 140-pound division. He's still got Jose Ramirez in that division. I'm sure he's still going to have other guys that are going to be aiming for him in that division. That division's always popping pretty good, as well as welterweight. I mean, not as much as welterweight, but it's always a pretty exciting division. And Josh Taylor is a sort of long, more gangly junior welterweight, so I could see him potentially moving up at some point. But I still think he's got unfinished business up there, or down there rather. And I think we're going to want to see him fight Jose Ramirez. I think that's going to be an exciting one. And, Kell Brook could be a fun fight as well. I'm just worried about, Kell Brook's condition. I'd like to know sort of where he's at. I'd like to see him be more active. That's a very good fighter, Kell Brook, who's kind of, you know, fallen off the radar a little bit. And I'd like to see him come back and do his thing. 45 main event, we've got Kamaru Usman, the freaking champion, going up against Colby Covington, the guy who thinks he's the champion, in a very entertaining and controversial fight, because Colby Chaos Covington, you guys, my goodness, he's really milking that heel angle, pissing a lot of people off, and definitely I think he's pissed off Kamaru Usman. Now, this is a very interesting fight for me, knuckleheads, because I do think that these two guys have a similar style, in that they're both a sort of wrestling base. However, I do think that they have, you know, there's certain advantages and disadvantages. So let's real quick go through the tail of the tape, you know, see who we think has got the advantages, see what we think each guy has to do, and then give you our prediction so that you can head on over to the sports book, you know, pull all that money out of the kids' college fund and just drop it one time on the one I'm telling you to bet on. Don't do that. That's me joking. But, you know, if you don't know that by now, you're an idiot. So, let's take a look at their ages first. You know, you got a 32-year-old Kamaru Usman versus a 31-year-old Colby Covington. Not a huge difference. They're both guys priming or heading into their prime, and I expect the best version of each guy in this fight coming up. You've got Kamaru Usman with a record of 15-1, and he's on a really impressive 14-fight winning streak dating back to 2013. And then you've got Colby Covington, 15-1 on a 6-fight winning streak. So, I mean, these guys are on an absolute rampage and essentially have the same record. And it's really, really impressive what these guys have been able to do in the UFC in a very tough division. As far as the height goes, they're about the same. I see that Covington's listed at 5'11", but every time I see them in the face-off, I feel like they're about the same size. One thing I will notice is Covington's head is massive compared to Usman's, you know, and I don't think Usman has a small head per se, but my goodness, Covington's got like a fucking helmet on, how big his skull is. As far as reach goes, I think there's a big advantage for Usman. It looks like he's got a 4-inch reach advantage. He's clocking in at 76 inches versus just 72 inches for Colby Covington. And that's pretty much, you know, the tail of the tape for these guys. Now, the difference in these guys, if you ask me, is Kamaru Usman seems to be the more powerful guy, ever so slightly. And Colby Covington seems to be the guy with the engine, the guy with the cardio, the guy that keeps coming, right? And they both kind of got that, but I don't think anybody's got it the way Covington does. A guy who threw more than 500 strikes against Robbie Lawler and basically set a UFC record in doing that. That's not something that you're going to have to deal with when you're fighting Usman. That is something that you're going to have to deal with in fighting Colby Chaos Covington. He really does create chaos in there. He's like the fucking 100-hand slap E-Honda Street Fighter 2 in there, because the guy just doesn't stop. And, you know, you could tell Robbie Lawler was almost trying to wait it out. Man, when is this fucking guy going to stop? And it just didn't. It just kept on happening. He kept on coming. So, you know, I do think that that's going to be a real key in this fight. You know, Usman is going to have to find a way to get this fucking pressure fighter off of him. Now, I do think their wrestling might negate itself a little bit. They might just cancel each other out with the wrestling, and it might end up just being a strike fest. That being said, Usman's slight power advantage could help him keep Colby off of him. But I just don't think Usman has that one-punch knockout power to keep a guy like Colby Covington at bay, and I don't think he's going to hit hard enough to earn Colby Covington's respect, really. I do think that a guy like Tyron Woodley would probably be a better sort of matchup, a sort of a kryptonite for that non-stop pressuring style, because Woodley does have that explosion, that one-strike explosion, that one-hitter quitter, if you will. But Usman, not so much. He's also the kind of guy that sort of wears you down and takes you out with volume. And it's not the excess of volume that we see from Covington, but still, he doesn't take you out in one punch. He kind of takes you out with combination punching and wrestling. So, I do think Usman is going to have to find a way to keep Colby Covington off of him. I do think he's going to have to look for power punches, power counters to kind of earn Colby Covington's respect. Colby Covington, on the other hand, is just going to have to do what he always does. Go in there, land a ton of strikes, and win this fight off of sheer volume, off of sheer quantity. And I do think he's capable of doing that. And Knuckleheads, this is a very close fight. I do think this fight is a 50-50 fight. But in my opinion, I'm going to swing it 51-49 for Colby Chaos Covington. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea. I know he can be a pain in the ass with all the shit he talks, which I think is, semi-funny. Sometimes he makes a lot of mistakes when he's talking and he just sounds like an idiot. But I like the drama. I like the BS angle that he's playing. I think it's kind of funny, the heel angle. But most of all, this guy can fight. And I'm going against the odd makers here, ever so slightly, who have Kamaru Usman as a -185 favorite from what I'm seeing online. So I'm going a little bit against the odd makers here because I just feel like Colby Covington is just a non-stop freaking guy, and it's going to be really hard for anybody to get him off unless they got that one-hitter quitter, unless they got that Deontay Wilder right hand or that Francis Ngannou right hand, or maybe can hit really hard like a Tyron Woodley. But a guy like Kamaru Usman, I don't know if his striking is advanced enough and if his power is high enough to keep a guy like Colby Covington off of him for 5 rounds. And I do think that Covington is going to present a very serious problem and puzzle for Kamaru Usman, and I ever so slightly have to give him the edge. So that's my prediction. Of course, we've got some great fights on the undercard. There's Amanda Nunes fighting Germaine de Randamie. You've got Marlon Moraes against Jose Aldo, Peter Yan and Uriah Faber, and Max Holloway, of course, against Volkanovski. I'll just give you my quick rundown. I think Holloway gets the job done. I just think his reach advantage and his striking is just going to be too much for Alexander Volkanovski, who's a really short guy, a really squat guy. And, of course, he can pull off the win because, he does have good power. And it sounds like he's relying on that power from what I've heard him say to Max Holloway. But I don't think that's going to be enough to get Holloway out of there. So it's kind of the same situation as Covington versus Usman, sort of, because I think in order for a guy like Volkanovski to beat Holloway, he's probably going to have to knock him out or hurt him real bad, and I don't think he can do that against Max Holloway, who's shown some really serious durability. Of course, Amanda Nunes, we're talking about the GOAT, the greatest woman of all time in combat sports, and she is listed as the favorite, and rightfully so. I mean, I don't think Germaine de Randamie is going to beat her. I do think de Randamie can put up a good fight, and if she goes in there confident, she could potentially pull off a win because she is a striker. And Amanda Nunes is probably going to want to strike with her, and Germaine de Randamie looks to be the longer, taller, bigger woman. That being said, I just feel like Amanda Nunes is an absolute beast, and she's got a lot of confidence and momentum
on her side right now, but you never know, especially with women's MMA. It's been a surprise after a surprise after a surprise. So you never know what's going to happen there. But I'm going to have to go with Amanda Nunes. I'm also going to have to go with Marlon Moraes beating Jose Aldo. I just think Moraes is a real killer. The only guy that's been able to deal with him at all has been Henry Cejudo. That being said, we don't know how he's going to come off that loss against a guy like Jose Aldo, who may be sort of surging, but that's also a consideration because Jose Aldo is dropping down in weight, I believe, to take this fight. So I like Moraes in this fight. I just think he's younger, he's explosive, he's got some good experience now, he's fought some great guys, he's taken a lot of them out in the first round. Obviously, as the fight progresses, all those chances improve. So this could be a very close fight. And in fact, I think this will probably be a really great fight. But I see Marlon Moraes pulling it off. And then Peter Yan and Uriah Faber. Obviously Uriah Faber's a great fighter, but already, I think, way past his prime. I think Peter Yan gets the job done. Just a younger, fresher guy in the young man sport. And when you're an old geezer, you ain't got no business in a young man sport. That being said, I'm just kidding about Uriah Faber being an old geezer. He's not an old geezer, but, nowhere near, in my opinion, what he once was. And I think Peter Yan gets the job done just based on youth and skill and experience and everything else. So let's see what we're working with here. Dale Ewan, I think that's how you say it. Thank you so much for joining the chat, brother. He says, how does Usman deal with VADA? Uh-oh, here we go. More PED stuff. It's always got to rear its ugly head. That PED. Damn you, PED. I don't know. We're going to see what happens. He's either going to pass or he's not going to pass. He is looking rather jacked, I must say. But, maybe it's natural. Maybe, he's getting some of that Mexican meat that Canelo's getting. Who knows what's happening there. Marco Martinez says, tomorrow's UFC card is the personification of why the UFC is overtaking boxing. The card is completely stacked. And I agree, that is a stacked card. But, Top Rank seemingly taking a page out of the UFC book. They're putting a nice little card together for us tomorrow as well, Marco Martinez. And I do suggest that you tune in, especially for that Teofimo Lopez fight versus Richard Comey. That's going to be a fun fight. Definitely something you guys want to tune into. Hey, there are 8 at the very least concurrent viewers in here with only 2 likes. I'm going to ask you guys to please hit that like button. If you're watching this on the replay, you guys, comment, like, share. Tell your friends about this channel. We want to keep growing the channel. We really appreciate you guys. So go ahead and do that. Saul West says, Marco Martinez, just look at how good the prelims are. Always 50-50 matchups. And you see, when Saul West and Marco Martinez say stuff like that, it indicates what I've always suspected, which is that you can't fool the fans. The fans know when it's a good fight, when it's a bullshit fight, when they're getting their money taken from them, when it's worth it and when it's not. So, you guys are the personification of fight fans' sentiment with regards to good matchups versus shit matchups. It's something we're always combating on this channel, right? We're always saying, man, we're tired of the A-side versus B-side fights. We're tired, especially of the boxing culture. Let's stop, building guys up by having them fight tomato cans. Let's have guys fight guys on the same level. It's okay to lose. Losing is fine. Let's get rid of this undefeated culture in boxing. It's not helping anyone. We're not getting the best fights because of it. It's doing nothing but hindering everyone, not getting anyone paid, limiting careers left and right, and ruining the sport altogether. This undefeated obsession of boxing promoters and fighters is just ruining combat sports. And you ask me, what do I mean? Well, when you got a guy that's undefeated and they want to protect, I mean, they're never going to put them in there with the best fighters. And we've seen that over and over again in boxing. Just pick your favorite undefeated boxer, which there are several of them, and look at their record and look at the tomato cans that they've crushed along the way. And that's why guys like Dillian Whyte or Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, have more respect than guys like Deontay Wilder, unfortunately, who is now over 40 fights into his career and doesn't have half the resume that an Anthony Joshua has, and honestly doesn't even have the resume that a Dillian Whyte has. So that's the problem with boxing versus the UFC. The best guys don't fight the best guys, and that's something we need to get rid of in this sport and in combat sports altogether. Let's see here. Marco Martinez says, Matt the Immortal Brown is making a comeback fight, and it's the 9th fight from the top. Jose Aldo and Uriah Faber, both Hall of Famers, are curtain jerkers on the pay-per-view. You're right about the curtain jerking thing. Hopefully they're not jerking anything else. And Matt the Immortal Brown is a very exciting fighter. I love watching that guy fight. That last elbow he landed against Diego Sanchez was one of the most brutal fucking things I've ever seen in combat sports. That looked like something out of a Mortal Kombat video game when he did that against Diego Sanchez. So definitely looking forward to watching that guy fight again. Marco Martinez says, this card is so stacked 1 month after a very stacked pay-per-view. The UFC pumps out premium cards one after the other. It's because they got all the best fighters. Jamaican Boxing in the chat. Wagwan, my son. Thanks for joining the chat, brother. He says, shout out to Dana White for giving us the best fight week after week. Uncle Dana with the Christmas presents. Marco Martinez says, I think in the main event, I'm taking Usman based on Usman's strength. I'm calling a huge upset in Volkanovski. He has looked great taking out top contenders in the division. Wow. Wow, Marco, you're really going out on a limb with Volkanovski. You know, the Usman thing, that's a 50-50 fight. Anyone can win that. But Volkanovski, I do think Holloway's got some real advantages there. Jamaican Boxing says, Usman, Holloway, Lioness, Aldo, Yan, and Perry for the wins. You know, Perry is another guy I'm really excited to watch fight. That's going to be awesome. Marco Martinez says, I think Jose Aldo gets KO'd early. I don't like fighters cutting weights far below where they should be fighting. I think it takes their chin away, and I agree with that. There's a lot of science, I think, to that, too, with the rehydration of the brain and the like. Jamaican Boxing says Mike Perry versus Jeff Neal is going to be some crazy black-on-black violence. Jamaican Boxing, my boy. You're always on a roll, brother. Marco Martinez saying Aldo is actually coming off a loss to Volkanovski. There you go. Marco Martinez, I'm going for Faber, but for me, that's a 50-50 fight. You know, we'll see. Faber, you know, is a little bit erratic. At times, he's looked like the old Faber. At times, he's looked like, you know, not so much the old Faber, but un-old Faber. So we'll see what happens there. Marco Martinez says, on the ESPN part of the undercard, Caitlin Vieira's fighting. That's probably the #1 contest fight for Nunez's next opponent. I like that. Marco Martinez laughing at Jamaican Boxing's joke there. And then Jamaican Boxing says, Combat Sports won this year. Right now I'm watching Virgil Ortiz fight on the zone, and it's only Friday. Cheers to the chat. One love. What's up, brother? Hey! I need to get on there and watch Virgil Ortiz, man. That guy's a beast. I'm going to get on there and watch it right now. If you can give me some updates in this chat, feel free to do so. Dale Ewan says, Clarissa Shields will be at the UFC. She next for Nunez. I don't know if she wants to do that, my man. This game requires a lot more than just hands if you want to be the man in MMA. If you just got hands in MMA, you may be in for a rude awakening, because as soon as those guys get you on the ground, try to rip your arm off, you're going to be helpless if you're a boxer. Marco Martinez says, before you go, Did you catch Dana saying he's in talks with Clarissa Shields to take on Nunes? I think she's a bit too big to make 145. I think that's a horrible fight for Clarissa Shields. Huge money for Dana White, but I think Clarissa Shields gets lit up by Amanda Nunes, and pretty scary. Jamaican boxing. Hold on. Marco Martinez says Perry versus Brown would be an awesome fight. Jamaican boxing says LOL. Marco Martinez. Mike Perry says he's 2% black, so it is what it is. Oh my goodness. Whiskey Dragonfly. What it do, family? What it do, Whiskey Dragonfly? What it do with you, brother? He says last time 3 belts was on the line was UFC 217, Bisping versus GSP, Cody versus TJ, and JJ versus Rose. All 3 belts changed hands. Oh my goodness, Whiskey, you're putting out some ominous energy in that one, brother. And you know, we could have the same exact thing tomorrow. But we'll just have to wait and see. I do again ask that you guys join me live tomorrow when we discuss those fights. Immediately after the fights, we will go live. In the meantime, I wanted to give you guys some news, some really exciting news. So it's a couple things. First off, you know, Fighters Rep 9 is coming February 28th. As you guys know, we've already matched our first pro fight. I'm really excited about that. We've got a couple more pros waiting in the wings that we're looking to match, and it's really coming together nicely, you guys. I mean, if you see the level of competition we've got and the level of talent we've got on this card coming on the 28th of February, I mean, it is going to be an absolute fucking slugfest in every fight, and I'm so pumped about it. Another thing is, besides that, and I've actually got a bout agreement right here. Bout agreement in order to, you know, go over tomorrow. I'm going to go over it tomorrow with the matchmaker, Jesse Brown. We're going to have a little meeting and, you know, send the fighters their bout agreement. But besides that, next week I have a treat for you guys. It's looking like on Wednesday of next week, that's the hump day, I am going to be having a sit down with none other than Andy Ruiz as trainer, head coach, legendary boxing trainer at this point, Manny Robles. I actually hit him up. We've interviewed him in the past, and you know, we hit it off. He's a really cool guy. You know, he's obviously one of the most talented trainers in the world. He's right now training Prince Charles Martin for his comeback heavyweight fight, or another heavyweight fight. Charles Martin, as you know, was a former heavyweight champ as well. And he's right now training him for his next fight. He's not too far from us. He's in the area. And so I'm going to have a sit down with him on Wednesday. And, you know, we're going to discuss what went down with the Andy Ruiz fight, you know, what he's going to do for Andy Ruiz in the future, what we have to look forward to, Charles Martin, and so much more. So that's something I'm planning on doing on Wednesday. If I interview him on Wednesday, since we typically go live, or since we do go live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m., I'll probably release the interview the Thursday, which is the next day. And it is going to be like a recorded interview. It's not going to be a live one. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to him in the first person. I'll just, you know, have the camera in his face. And we'll have a conversation about what happened, something I'm pretty excited about. So we'll see. I think that's something that you guys will enjoy very much. And please, you know, tell your friends about the channel. I mean, I think, you know, with the guests we're getting on this show, I mean, I think at some point, you know, we're going to get a lot more recognition. And, you know, tell me if there's anybody you guys want to see on the show. I'm actually trying to get Caleb Plant on here as well. I would love to get Harrison, the one that's fighting Charlo next week, which I'm really excited about that fight. I mean, it's a real bad blood fight. So I'd love to get Tony Super Bad Harrison on the show. And, you know, Manny Robles next week, maybe Caleb Plant. We had, you know, Stacy McKinley. We had Gerald Washington. We had Regis Prograis. It'd be badass to maybe get Josh Taylor on here. So we're going to keep pushing. We're also going to get some of the Fighters Rep guys on the show. These guys have some incredible personalities. Especially, man, you guys have to meet some of these kids, especially fighters like Khosrov Sadarov, who fights for us. He's just hilarious. He just wants to fucking fight everybody. I mean, this guy is absolutely hilarious. There's, you know, cocky young fighters. There's charismatic young fighters. And there's a bunch of young fighters I'm going to want to get on the show. So, you know, I'm excited to put them on here. Oh, and we also, you know, we've also had some interest expressed to us from Coach Julio Trana out of one of the best striking and MMA schools, period, in the world, Saxon Muay Thai. Julio Trana trains, you know, UFC fighters and guys and, you know, and M1 Global. And, you know, he's training guys that are really doing big things. And, of course, they're located out here in California. So that's another really interesting interview for me. So, yeah, you know, we're going to be bringing some really good interviews to you guys. And I really want you guys to get behind some of these fighters we've got on this Fighters Rep card, man. It's going to be insane. Wait till you guys see the matchups we've got and the level of skills of some of these young fighters. Let's see here. What do you think about Conor fighting Cowboy at 170 for a 155 title shot? That's really weird that they would do something like that. But, you know, Conor generates so much money that it's possible, man. Anything's possible with Conor, dude. When you're bringing that much money in, anything is possible. Because why? Because money talks and bullshit walks, brothers. Marco Martinez says, George, is Wilson Ha going to be coming back to Fighters Rep anytime soon? You know, Wilson Ha is one of our champions. The guy is an absolute fucking beast. And I wish he would come back to Fighters Rep. I'm not sure if he's going to be available on the 28th of February. I believe Crew Walter, who's, you know, the head of Sit Yaw Tong, which is the team where Wilson Ha fights out of. He may be out of the country in Thailand at that time. If you guys don't know, Crew Walter is a champion, a world champion in Muay Thai, extremely recognized, and he's like a star out in Thailand as well. And so, you know, he's going to be headed out there. So we're probably not going to be able to get our hands on any of his fighters, which is unfortunate if he's not going to be here. But, you know, we're going to have to wait and see if Wilson Hall is going to be able to come back or not. Marco Martinez says, Conor getting a 155 title shot before Gaethje is a joke. Conor hasn't won in 3 years, and even if he beats Cowboy, he's beating a guy on a 2-fight losing streak. I agree with that. Dale Ewan says, Machado wins by stoppage body shot. Knuckleheads, we've been on here for 48 minutes, almost 50 minutes. At this point, I'm going to have to shut this chat down. Get me some whiskey. I suggest you guys prepare your bottles for tomorrow. We got a long day of fights. We got a lot to talk about after tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. So definitely join us live right here tomorrow. And, you know, until next time, which is tomorrow after those badass fights, keep it clean, knuckleheads. Much love.